Hi guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe if you love watching bookish content. Now, first of all, I want to thank everybody who has newly subscribed to this channel, everybody who has found me through my last video. I wouldn't have expected it to have so many views. I was so delighted by all of the very kind and insightful comments that I got, and if you've been a subscriber before that, thank you for sticking with me. Today I'm going to talk about my April and May reading wrap-up, and I'm going to try to keep it short because it's already so hot in this room. As usual, if you want to know how much money I saved by using my library card, then stick until the end of the video. Let's start with the month of April. So I finished 4 books in April, but I attempted to read 6. Now, if you do the math, you know that I DNF'd 2 books in April. And you've probably seen these books. If not, then please feel free to go and watch my other video, the one that I uploaded before this. It's a reading vlog where I attempt to read the 4 worst rated books on my Goodreads TBR, and these are them. To keep it short, these 2 books I had to DNF. So this one is an Australian dystopian novel. This one is a thriller. This is The Next to Die by Sophie Hannah. This is the Swan book by Alexis Wright, and they just didn't work out for me. In this one, it was so more the plot and the characters, the writing, just nothing came together for me. And then the Swan book really was because I just couldn't deal with the prose. It didn't suit me whatsoever. It felt like I was reading something very overly descriptive, overwritten, something very rambly. And then these 2, my ratings weren't too great. So Beatrice and Virgil by Yann Martel, I gave a 3-star to. I thought that the idea of the book was too clever for its own good. It didn't quite come together. And then Tschick, it was a 1.5 star because this is very problematic in my opinion. So head over to that vlog if you want to know all the details. So those were 4 books that I read and DNF'd in April. That leaves us with 2 books that were more successful. So we have Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. If you're a murder mystery fan, you've probably seen this book go around. It was very hyped up. I ended up giving this a 3.5 star. So I thought it was a solid read. I had a good time with it, but at the same time, I didn't feel like it lived up to my expectations. Our main character is Ernest Cunningham. He is a writer, and he joins his family on a retreat that takes place in a very snowy, isolated cabin type of setting. And then a murder happens, and in theory, we're left with this locked room type of mystery, which usually I love. Now, the most special thing about this book is that it's 100% self-aware. I can't remember if it's written in first-person narration, I think so, but basically the book is directly talking to you as the reader. There's a lot of foreshadowing going on. In a way, it reminds me of the Lemony Snicket books that I'm reading right now, the series of unfortunate events. That self-awareness was really what appealed to me. I like how it on purpose called out all of the murder mystery tropes and even rules that are out there. It was really fun. As you can guess from the title, all of the family members have some kind of secret. They've murdered a person one way or the other. And I really like how the book uncovered pieces of these people's past little by little. It doesn't just get dumped on you in one go. Reasons I didn't quite love this is because, first of all, I didn't really connect to the main character. I don't know if it was the writing or just the character. I didn't feel invested into his story or his well-being at all. And the other thing is that I wish that this was more of an amateur sleuth mystery type of book. I think there was a little bit too much police procedural in there for me. It made it feel less cozy, but all in all, it was solid, and I will definitely pick up the second book. My favorite read in April with 4 stars was What You Are Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Aoyama. This was translated from the Japanese language to the English language, and I listened to it as an audiobook. My goodness, this book was absolutely charming. It is such a great, cozy, comforting read. In this book, each chapter follows a new person from a different walk of life, different ages, and very different lifestyle. What they have in common is that they're all kind of unsatisfied at the moment with their lives. And their path leads them into this cute community library where they meet the librarian, Miss Komachi. And it seems like there's something magical about her because she manages to suggest books to these people that not just clarify something that they were trying to read up on, but it kind of pushes them into a certain direction to find themselves in their lives. There's not a lot that happens in this book. It is really about searching for something within. And what I really liked was that these were pretty much all open-ended stories. So you don't get a neat bow in the end, at the end of each story. You don't get the solution handed to you on a silver platter, or to these people, I should say. It is really more about the changes that happen in your attitude and your outlook on life, which I thought was just so comforting. I really appreciated all the very detailed descriptions of the small things, like food, for example. You can imagine, I mean, this is set in Japan, so obviously the food descriptions were out of this world. It made me hungry. What stopped me from giving this a 5-star is that sometimes I felt like it was a bit on the nose, but nevertheless, it was incredibly enjoyable. For the month of May, I'm gonna go once again from worst rated to best rated. Starting with a 3-star book, I read Women Talking by Miriam Toews. Now, this I've seen around the internet. I know that a movie was made based on this novel, but I didn't want to pick it up until I heard Priscilla from Evening Reader, I think it was her, talk about this. I'm going to link her channel down below. She does great content, and if you like long format videos, you will love her videos. So this is a fictionalized account of something that happened in real life. From 2005 to 2009, there was a series of gas-facilitated sexual assaults that happened in a Mennonite community in Bolivia. Absolutely horrendous. It is hundreds of girls and women that at first didn't know that they were drugged during their sleep and raped by the men in their Mennonite community. The book is essentially what the title suggests. It is a group of women secretly meeting in a hayloft to talk about their future, because they have basically 3 options, which is to stay and fight, to leave the colony, or to stay and forgive the men. So this is a book about these women trying to reason with each other on what the path forward is, what is the best thing that they can do right now for themselves and for the future of the colony, because they're not just thinking about themselves, they're thinking about their children, their husbands, and other people in the community too, and they're trying to reason, but at the same time, their faith plays also a big role in this. And you know, mixing reason and faith is sometimes not easy, so you can imagine that there's some very, very interesting points brought up and different perspectives from the women in this group that are discussing this. The reader is presented with so many point of views, and some of them might contradict what the reader's own belief is. In my case, it was like that. But at the same time, you're still trying to comprehend and, you know, put yourself in their shoes. So I think the book did a really good job in facilitating these conversations between these characters. Now, the reason why I had to dock 2 entire stars for my rating, because I think this would have had the potential to be a 5-star read, is because I just could not get behind the narration of this book. This was, I think, the first book ever that I read where I just couldn't understand why the author chose this specific type of narration. So the book is told in minutes, and because these Mennonite women cannot read or write, it is a man, his name is August, who writes down these minutes. So everything is from his point of view. He's a man who has left the community and then has since then come back. Why is it that this is the perspective that we're getting? And I thought maybe it's because the author wants to give us, you know, an outside perspective, a perspective from a different gender, a perspective from somebody who wasn't involved in this, who is maybe impartial. I promise I was giving the book the benefit of the doubt, but until the end of the book, I didn't understand the choice. I couldn't get behind it at all. It actually took me out of the story a lot of times, and I really, really disliked his point of view. I wanted to be immersed in this conversation that these women were having. I would have preferred like a third person narration or even a POV from one of the women, but from his point of view, sometimes his thoughts would wander off about the crush that he has on one of these women, which I think was so inappropriate. Or he would think of a song or think about that time he went to jail while he was away from the community. Every time his thoughts drifted off to something else that did not have anything to do with that conversation, I would get so annoyed. I really didn't like it. And I don't think that any of that, of what we learned about him, brought anything to the story. It really, really took me out of it. Even if there was a specific intention for the writer to choose August as the narrator or the minute taker, I really, really didn't enjoy it. I would be so curious to know if any of you have read this book and if you feel the same way, or if you maybe felt that there was a value added in having August as the narrator. Because after finishing this book, I did look up some reviews on Goodreads, and it looks like quite a few people agree with me. Next up, with 3.25 stars, I read Nosy Neighbours by Freya Sampson. Now, Freya Sampson has earned a 5-star for me last year. It was for The Last Chance Library. It made it onto my favorites of the year video. It was such a wholesome book. So I was looking for that same vibe in this one. It is actually a new release. In this book, our main characters are 77-year-old Dorothy Darling, and then we have Kat, who's a young woman who moves into the same building as Dorothy Darling. This building is called Shelley House, and it once was this beautiful, beautiful, very big mansion-looking apartment complex, but it since then has been crumbling, and it's basically awaiting demolition. Dorothy is extremely attached to this building. She has lived in her apartment her entire life. And then Kat is just a sublet from one of the other tenants, and she's new there. She doesn't really care about, you know, the other residents, the tenants, or the building. There's some tenants who want to fight this demolition. They want to fight whoever wants to buy this building to completely renovate it or tear it down. They want to keep Shelley House. Kat really doesn't want to get involved. She wants to just go about her day doing her job, but she then gets swept up into these events because there's a weird series of attacks happening to the tenants. This book unfortunately didn't hook me. It took me until halfway through the book to feel like, okay, this is finally picking up. The first half, I was not very excited to read about it. I thought it was a little slow. The book is building up to the fact that some of these residents have their secrets, but at the same time, I knew that this is kind of a low stakes book. So that's why I wasn't really compelled to keep reading to figure out what was wrong. So it wasn't exactly a page turner. There's a very little romance part in here that also I just didn't really buy. The point where it got really good for me, or where I started enjoying myself, is really when, you know, you get that feeling of, okay, now these residents are all sticking up for each other, and you get that feeling of community, and that's what warmed your heart. So when I got to those parts, I started enjoying myself. But before that, I thought it was just a bit slow. Next up, I have My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. You've probably heard about this book. This is a very much talked about book in the literary fiction world. This story is about an extremely interesting friendship between Elena and Lila. The book is told from Elena's perspective, and they grow up as young kids in post-war Italy, to be more specifically in Naples in the 50s. This book starts when they're in like elementary school age, and it follows these two women growing up. There's 4 books in total. It's a quartet, and this follows them from childhood to being teenagers. This book does a great job in portraying the grittiness of Naples back then. Their lives are filled with violence, just random acts of violence in their homes, in their town. Everybody is very poor, or most people, I should say. And then there's also this notion that any family ever is at a feud with each other, and there's so much self-avenging going on in between these families. So somebody wrongs someone, you know that there's going to be an act of violence that is going to follow. So it's this very bleak picture that gets portrayed in how these two girls grow up. One of the ways to maybe get out of the situation is education. So education actually plays a big role in this book, which I thought was very great. Undoubtedly, the best part in this story is really this complicated dynamic between these two girls. From the start, when they were small, there's something like a competition going between the two of them. Be it about the grades, be it about the looks, be it about their dolls, and that pretty much continues all the way to them being teenagers. And the cool thing is that there's not one person, even though we're reading this from the point of view of Elena, I didn't find myself rooting for one of them. I didn't think that, oh, she's better than her. It's almost like the ball keeps rolling in and out of each one of these girls' court. So there's always someone who seems to be superior at some point than the other, or always one that envies the other, but it's always a back and forth, and it's always dynamic, it's always complex. This portrays female friendship in a very interesting way. And then both of these girls will now and again make decisions that I don't really agree with, and I'm ruffling my hair and think, oh no, why did you do that? There's a lot of beauty and simplicity in this book, and life just kind of passes by. There's nothing big happening here. It's really just us following them through their life. Puberty, growing up, sexuality is also a topic in this book. And there was one instance where I thought, why is Elena describing her own body with the male gaze? Is this author secretly a man? But then I realized, okay, it's probably because everybody around you talks about your body and other women's bodies in a certain way, especially back then maybe this is, you know, this is what you're going to use as a mirror. This is how you're going to view yourself too. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm not saying that this is overhyped, but I expected better, just because I know that a lot of people give this 5 stars. A lot of people love this. For a lot of people, this is their favorite piece of literary fiction, or the series, I should say. What I didn't love is that because of this first person narration, there's passages with very little dialogue in them. It makes the story form this one big blob. At times it felt like it's all vibes, very little plot, and I don't know if I exactly loved it. That's why my rating is a 3.5. I am continuing with the series in hopes of giving the other books a higher rating. But I guess my expectations were also blown out of proportion for this book. Next up, with also 3.5 stars and also a book where I had very high expectations, is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This is the first book in a fantasy series. This was a buddy read with Stuart. I'm gonna link his channel down below, which was super fun. We used Storygraph and exchanged notes on pretty much everything that we were reading. So that experience in itself, super fun. This was sold to me as a cozy fantasy, but it wasn't really. This ended up being way more serious than I thought. So Emily Wilde is our main character, and this book is told in her journal entries, because what she does is she is a scientist, she's a researcher. She wants to put together this encyclopedia that has any information that you could want or need about fairies in them. This takes place in 1909 in Scandinavia, so she travels to this extremely remote village to talk to some of the people there and do her field research. First of all, don't be fooled by the cover and the title of this book. Because I thought this was a cozy mystery, I thought the fairies are all these cozy little nice creatures, but turns out they're not just innocent. They can be quite brutal and dark, which was a positive surprise to me. I did not expect the tangle of murder and intrigue in fairy courts in this book, and here we are. I really like the fairy or folk lore that the author created for this book. I really enjoyed the way that these fairies were described. I like that they were not all good in the end, but that they have a very dark side to them, a side that really doesn't care about humans or sees humans as these like playthings, and that they're quite dangerous as well, but also magical because they can do awesome things. One of my favorite characters in here is actually Emily's dog Shadow. I loved reading about Shadow. One of the things that fell short for me is, once again, the narration in this book. I don't know, I'm just now realizing while filming this video that for some reason April and May were filled with books where I just didn't love the narration. This usually doesn't happen. I think this is the first time I'm mentioning this so many times. So the narration style chosen for this book is through journal entries. I don't think was the best choice for a fantasy book, what I'm realizing now, because sometimes very dangerous scenarios would happen to Emily and she would go through these big adventures, but it's just basically tell and not show, because everything happens after the fact, right? She writes it down afterwards. So whenever there's like a build up to something happening, were basically cut short, and then she narrates it after the fact, and okay, this is what happened, this is what happened, and that's what happened. But you already know that she's gonna be fine because she's the one who's creating these journal entries. So yeah, a lot of tell, too little show. Secondly, I felt like this book was trying to balance a low stake, more cozy fantasy, but then there's high action events that happen in this book. So it was trying to be both, and I think it should have picked a lane. I didn't love the romance in here because I thought that, okay, this is actually being set up to be a great like slow burn, slow build, and then it was just dropped into your lap. But I will say though, maybe I was not good at reading in between the lines because apparently Emily is neurodiverse, so she's really bad at reading social cues. So that's actually one of the reasons that I picked this book up, because this was sold to me as a fantasy version of The Maid by Nita Prose, because in there we also have a main character who is neurodiverse. In the end, again, my expectations were too high for this book. I think I had also very different expectations for this. I'm still decided if I should keep going in this series. And lastly, I finished An Immense World by Ed Yong. This is the most fascinating piece of nonfiction about the animal kingdom and what the senses of animals contribute to their Umwelten, to their worlds, and what they mean to them, and how different every single animal is from each human. Every paragraph that we got about a new animal, I don't know how this author managed to put so much information in there that it feels like I just read an entire research paper on one of the senses of this one animal. I have almost no notes. This is, I think, a must read for anybody who's remotely interested in animals. This was absolutely fascinating. I already said this in my main TBR. I wish I had a photographic memory so that I can recite every single fact that I read in this book randomly to people, because everything was just so eye-opening. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars just because the sheer volume of information that you get in this book was sometimes too much to digest. I felt like, in a way, it was a bit info dumpy, but it's fine. I'm not mad about it. I love this book. How else are you going to convey so much knowledge in one book? Absolutely incredible. I did this as an audiobook, but if I had to do it again, I would read a physical copy, just because when you're listening to an audiobook, you cannot do anything that will remotely take away your attention, because if you do that, you're going to miss 5 or 6 facts within a 5-second span about an animal. I gained a new appreciation through this book for all kinds of animals and insects. Absolutely great book, and I need to check if this author has any other books like this out, because I learned so much. So that was all the books that I read and DNF'd in April and May. What is your favorite book that you read in April or May? I unfortunately didn't have a 5-star read, but maybe you did. And if you just want to let me know that you're still watching, why don't you leave me an emoji of one of your favorite animals? I almost forgot. By using my library card, I saved between these 2 months $114.72 Canadian before taxes. I actually remembered this month that the numbers I've been giving you are only referring to the books that are on my TBR, but I actually also get DVDs. But can you believe it? DVDs. We're back to DVDs because streaming services, DVDs and cookbooks and board games from my library, and I never factor that into this amount, so it's usually more than what I tell you at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I have another reading vlog that I'm working on this month, so if you like those, please feel free to subscribe so you don't miss it, and give this video a thumbs up if you like reading wrap-ups. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.